Next, we're going to bring on one of the more eagerly anticipated panels of the Florida Insurance Summit, and that's the one where we hear from our legislators who can tell us about what to expect this year in 2019 in the legislative session. So if y'all will come on up. Kyle Ulrich is going to be the moderator of this panel. Kyle is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at the Florida Association of Insurance Agents, and he leads the government and political affairs, communications, and membership operations of the association. FAI also was the sponsor last night of our great cocktail reception that turned out to be more like brisk breezes and cool conversation and not the balmy breezes we thought we might have here in Miami. Tal, I'm going to turn it over to you. You ready for your folks to come on board?
I'm ready. Everybody who's supposed to be participating, come on up. And I'll introduce you as you get up here. Come on, Senator. It's your time. All right, so while everybody's coming up to the stage, I'll just kind of introduce who we have on today's panel. First, we have Senator Kathleen Passidomo from Naples. We have Senator Doug Broxson from the Pensacola area, Representative Elizabeth Fetterhoff from Daytona Beach area, Representative Rick Stark from Broward County, and we had David Santiago that I saw Mark Delegal take out of the room about 2 minutes ago. So if anybody could page Mark Delegal and ask him to give me my panelist back. Oh, you're innocent? All right, well, everybody take a seat and we'll get started. And whenever David decides to join us, he can. Well, first of all, thank you to each of you for taking the time to come down and join us here in Miami. As Liz said, you know, this is always one of the panels that I think a lot of people here really look forward to, and to try to find out kind of from the people who make policy here in Florida what we can anticipate in the upcoming session. But before we get to all of the insurance stuff that we're going to talk about, I first wanted to just, you know, kind of give a little bit of background on these folks here at the table. I told you who they are and where they're from, but each of these people here at the table have been involved in insurance policy here in the state of Florida their entire career in public service. They all know these issues very, very well. They come from different backgrounds, but these are the folks that me and others in the room rely on, and because they understand the issues. And so earlier this week, the Senate released their assignments, committee assignments and positions and so forth, and proud to say that I have two friends here who, first, Senator Passidomo was named Majority Leader of the Florida Senate, which is, congratulations. And then my good friend, Senator Broxson, who I've known for quite some time, member of the association, been very, very active with us, is going to be Banking and Insurance Chairman for the next 2 years. Representative Fetterhoff, fresh off a decisive primary and general election win. While this is now your first term in the Florida House, you've obviously been around this process for a very long time. You know the issues that we're going to talk about very well, and we look forward to working with you. Representative Stark, another licensed agent here on the panel, our resident health insurance expert, and I know we're right in the middle of Medicare and Medicaid, you know, open enrollment, and so we appreciate you taking some time out of your office this morning to come and join us. And then, of course, Representative Santiago, who has really dealt with all things insurance during his time in the Florida legislature. So all of these folks come with an incredible background and pedigree in these issues, and we'll start getting into the issues. Every session, you know, obviously we all care about things that are going on in the insurance world. But there are other issues that are happening and going on, other priorities of presiding officers that really kind of shape what session is going to look like. And so before getting into the insurance-specific topics, I want to take an opportunity to give each of you the opportunity to kind of tell us what you think the leaders of your individual caucuses or chambers will be looking at and talking about this year, some bigger issues, and then also some things that maybe you're interested in doing. You know, Senator Pasadomo, now in your new role, that may curtail your ability to file bills and that sort of thing, but nonetheless, you will, I'm sure, be effective in trying to move forward some things that are important to you. Outside of insurance, what are some of the topics that you'd like to address this upcoming session?
Well, first of all, you can hear me, right? You can always hear me even without this. I want to thank you all for inviting me to participate. I think when you asked me, you probably assumed I would be doing all things insurance or helping my good friend Doug with insurance issues. But I would like to say that I'm very excited about the next 2 years because I think Senator Galvano will be a terrific president. And you can tell what his philosophy is based upon the remarks he gave when we voted him in as president. And it was nothing about him. It was all about us and all about the body and all of us being successful in our initiatives. And so for me, that was great news to hear, and at the time I didn't know that I would have this wonderful new opportunity, so I quickly rushed in and filed my annual truth and damages bill, and I had my bad faith in drafting and all, you know, my usual same old, and unfortunately I probably won't be able to pursue those, but I'm hoping that I could work with Doug's committee and the Judiciary Committee to get done some of those measures. And I think those kind of issues are going to be addressed one way or the other, because I think we're committed to that. Personally, my whole goal is to make sure that my members are going to be successful, and so, you know, Doug's got a great committee that he's chairing. He's got some really important thoughts on how to run that committee, and I'm going to help him. I'm going to try to get him to be successful in that, and I do want to pursue a couple of things. I want to keep looking at the Sadowski funds that I think, you know, the trust funds that every year we've rated to balance the budget. The public are becoming more and more insistent that we start looking at affordable housing. Of course, that does impact your industry as well, and let's see how we can do something to protect those funds, and also something that living in Southwest Florida, living on near the Gulf, and also representing Hendry County, which has the lake. We have a huge problem, as you know, with blue-green algae, red tide. We are back now with dolphins washing up on the beach, and the public is becoming impatient with the legislature in our response to the problem. So it's something that we're going to have to address, and I've been using the septic to sewer terms, you know, frequently, and fertilizer frequently, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will work with me on both sides to accomplish more, you know, nuts and bolts responses to these issues. So that's really what and I'm looking forward to working with your industry. And real quickly and briefly, what I'm looking for is your support of us to get our initiatives done. And every time I talk to a group from the industry, I say, you need to band together as a group and come up with what do you want to help us accomplish. And it can't be 45 things, because we're never going to get 40, which is what has been happening over the years. So, you know, get together, come back to us and say, this is really important.
Or 45 different ways to fix the same problem, right?
Exactly. Well, whatever. I mean, and I think David Altmaier was correct. We've got a big issue with assignment benefits. Let's put that to bed and then move on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Broxton, what, obviously you've done all things insurance and been very engaged in assignment of benefits here in the last couple of years. What are some other issues that might be kind of, you know, close to home, literally and figuratively, that you'd like to address in the upcoming session?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I want to echo what Senator Pasadomo said about our leadership. It's always difficult in anybody, and especially the Senate, when you have issues that the presiding officer is passionate about, and you leverage your positions with the House based on those issues. And I think the new president has told us that his issues are secondary and ours will be primary. And that, frankly, that was the biggest news that we received in the cycle. I will tell you, last night, Many of you came and spoke to me, and if I were to do what you've asked me to do, I would be chairman for 1 month. We thank you for all your suggestions, but we have an issue that should have been settled 6 years ago. Anytime something is not settled in the legislature and ends up in the courts, it becomes settled in many ways in law. If we don't deal with this AOB issue in the next 2 years, first of all, you may not have a chance to see it for 10 years because the state is very complicated. And I think in deference to my Democratic colleague here, the minority leader has already been selected for 2020. And I don't think you can find that you'll get a lot of time with him on what's important to us. But we've got to deal with AOB. It's definitely an expansion, a scope that we've never anticipated as far as the legal community. We have settled issues on that, but if we don't resolve that issue, and I think we will, it may not be the whole loaf, but it's going to be part of the loaf. And we're going to try to get all of it settled, but you're going to see a real effort. The president I've spoken to, he's mentioned to me twice about the issue. He's ready to move on it, and I think our committee will be receptive to it, and it will be a fair, pro-consumer. This is not about insurance or attorneys. This is about our consumers. And the people that will have to pay the premiums are the people that can least afford it. And I cannot believe this is a bipartisan issue. This should be a single issue for the legislature to deal with. It's going to be a fun year. I think the president picking Senator Passidomo is a real message to all of us. She is an even-tempered. She believes in autonomy. She believes in allowing members to be members. And she will be a great advocate of good public policy and do it in a polite, courteous way that will allow the senators to do what they do best. And be patient. I'll be glad to meet with any of you. We're going to certainly have a lot of think tanks prior to the final bill being presented, but we have a chance, and hopefully we're going to do it in the next 2 years. Hopefully this year, but certainly in the next 2 years, get the full loaf.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Federhoff, I think that there's a lot of new members coming into the legislature who are trying to find the bathroom right now, much less trying to figure out what issues they'd like to manage or tackle. You've been in this process for a long time. You know it. I'm sure that there are issues that are important to you. I know AOB is obviously one that you have worked on a lot. What are some of the other issues that you look forward to working on now in the House of Representatives?
Sure. So as many of you know, you've worked with me over the years. I worked in Senator Dorothy Uckel's office for 5 years as her legislative assistant. So I've worked on the AOB issue. I've carried around those files for many years. I'm tired of it. We need to get this passed. I look forward to working on the issue and getting it done. It's definitely something that our consumers, like you were saying, need the relief. It's ridiculous how much it's grown in the last 10, 12 years, and it's just something that needs to be addressed. And honestly, I know you're probably going to address this later, but I would say that the change in leadership and the change in who's in charge of banking and insurance over on the Senate side will definitely help get this moving a little bit easier than in previous years. For me personally, the senator was a big proponent of financial literacy. That's going to be one of the first bills that I file. It's going to be a little difficult coming from the Senate side. 6 bill slots doesn't seem like enough. I've got a lot of ideas and things that I want to do. So I'm going to try to use those 6 bill slots wisely, but financial literacy is one of the first ones I'm going to do. I just think that's something that we need to get done as well. Our students need to have that education before they get out into the workforce and before they go to college, before they're getting credit cards and before they're signing their life away with student loans. They need to understand what that means. So that's an issue I'm very passionate about. Another big issue that I hope to work on is the mental health issue. You know, obviously with Parkland, we've gotten a taste of the mental health issue and where there are holes in the process, and we need to fix those holes. There's issues with funding for mental health, and there are issues with the way that we're treating our mental health individuals. I'm a veteran, and so this is a very important issue from that perspective, as far as the suicide rate with veterans is ridiculous and unacceptable. We need to make sure that individuals that are coming back from, you know, with PTSD or any other issues are getting the treatment that they need. So it's something that I plan on working a couple different angles on that particular issue. So those are really my big ones right now. So.
Well, I think, you know, obviously financial literacy is something that the Senator has worked on for many, many years, and I think, I can't speak for anybody else in this room, it is a very, very important issue for our young people in this state. Some of the things that, you know, now coming out with student debt and credit card debt and all of that, it's a very important issue, so I wish you, you know, all the luck in the world trying to get that done.
Unfortunately, Senator Hudson's already agreed to do it on that side, so we should be able to get that going.
Good,
So,
good.
Thank you.
Deputy Minority Leader, Representative Stark. What do you want to work on this year? You know, obviously, you know, most recently ranking member of the Insurance and Banking Committee in the House, and so you've been, you know, intimately involved in all these issues. But I know you have some other things that you would like to work on. What are some of the things outside of insurance that you're interested in?
Well, thank you. It's going to be a busy year for me. I haven't, other than being a deputy whip, I haven't been in an actual leadership position, and this is something that we want to be in our senior term. Of course, we get real busy, and they say, well, we got what we asked for.
Also, Broward delegation chair.
That's right. So as a deputy leader, you know, I'm going to be active in, you know, what the minority party's priorities are, but also one of the things that we always have when we get into our last term is really mentoring and working with new members coming in, and that's, you know, that's really a bipartisan thing. Both parties have to help their newer members to become acclimated. But I was also elected to be the the delegation leader for Broward County for our state senators and state representatives, and we do have some of our first meetings coming up as early as next week, and I've heard already that we still are going to be dealing with at least for the remainder of this coming year, with the aftermath of the school shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. I've been told that some of the parents are going to be coming and speaking to us. I thought that regardless of how people voted last year, that the legislature did come together to discuss school safety. The schools have, if any of you have gone to any of the schools this year, I had a meeting in an elementary school, and actually it was almost like a fortress. Used to be that if I had to get in, we would get in, then you get up to the main gate and the school resourcer lets you in. We couldn't even get into the school. I had to get on the phone with somebody to find out how to get in and not be late for the meeting I had there. So in one sense, it's a good thing, but the thing is, you know, how are we going to continue on? And I know that there are still a lot of grievances from the parents from Parkland students that were either murdered or injured in that incident. But some of the other things that I'm working on, and this has been for quite a few years, I've been working on distracted driving and texting while driving. And we're going to give it another shot this year. Now, the state of Florida does have a law against texting and driving, but it's not a primary offense. I also want to thank Senator Pasadomo for both her tenure in the State House and now in the Senate, because she's done a lot of work with people on the roadways, also exclusively bicycles. You've had a few bills. I've co-sponsored those. And we had in Broward County on Sunday, a car plowed into a whole group of people while they were bicycling. 2 people have been killed from that already. I don't know how many injured. State Road 84, which runs along Interstate 595, was closed for almost half a day. And we don't know whether it was strictly distracted driving, whether it was, you know, there was a distraction that we don't know that was texting, but also why did she, you know, this woman driving the car veer into a whole lane of many, many bikers? So that's going to be under discussion. Also, one of the things that we're going to have to deal with also now, I'm the head of what's called the Jewish Caucus in the Florida legislature, and we do have an issue with Airbnb that is decided to delist rentals in settlement areas in Israel, and they haven't done similar things in other contentious situations throughout the world. So we're going to be working with this. We've got also 2 other representatives that are, you know, have been a little bit more public than I am. Representative Randy Fine and Representative Jared Moskowitz, and incoming Governor DeSantis has already weighed on this in a positive manner also. So this is something else we're going to have to deal with this session. Also, one thing that it's not a common bill. People don't hear about this very often, but I'm an adult that was adopted as a child. And when you're an adoptee, it's very difficult to get your original biological background information. And I'm coming into my 3rd session working on this. The whole issue of identity and getting original birth certificates has changed. I mean, all you got to do is listen to television, and you have 1, 2, or 3andMe and Ancestry.com. It is no secret today to be able to find your ancestors, whether you're a biological child or whether you're adopted. The question is, do adults, once they are 18 and over, have the right, if you want to call it a right, or the procedure to be able to get their birth records other than a court order in the state of Florida? And about 25 states now have made that process a lot easier. It was about 100 years to get where it is today, and it becomes a very sensitive issue. But the reality is, once you're, I mean, listen, I don't want to say how old I am, but I'm working on Medicare now, and I'm that age, so we'll leave it there. And, you know, at my age, I mean, am I not able to get my own records? I mean, who, you know, we're not really protecting anybody anymore. So these are just some of the things, and there are many others, but I just wanted to leave this on because, you know, I've got a few insurance priorities that I did want to discuss when we get there.
Sure. Well, thank you. And you know, you mentioning Parkland, obviously that is an issue that, as I was talking about at the very beginning, can become something that completely takes over the process and has an impact on all other things, which it rightfully should have. But those are the types of things that all of us have to deal with and all of you have to deal with, and trying to get some of our priorities moving and through, and then you have issues like that that the legislature must and does tackle. Representative Santiago, last but not least.
What was the question?
I don't remember.
What do we want to do? One of my ideas is to double the surplus requirements for property companies out of Gainesville. I'm working on that. Sorry, that's a joke for Tim Meenan. I told you I'd say it. You know, first, I'd like to say, I'm thinking back here. I think this is my 4th or 5th time here. I was 6 years served in the legislature. And same topic, the big topic, AOB. First, I'd like to say I apologize. You know, as a member of the legislature, not only apologize to you, but to constituents that pay their property casualty insurance, that continue to see rates go higher and higher. And to my big disappointment as I'm coming to my final year, I start reflecting back, is that my disappointment often in the process is that we often wait till things become a crisis. And you look back, what was the previous crisis we had in insurance? It was the sinkhole thing, right? That was completely out of control, right? And then finally we acted. And so I say that as disappointment and an apology, but also now excited with the optimism that I think we're going to tackle this issue this year. I really feel it. I've thrown my name in the ring as a willing participant. As many of you know, I know the subject like the back of my hand. I haven't really actively engaged on it in the past 4 years because I felt nothing would happen. I was kind of reading the tea leaves. You know, I'll go back a little bit in history. I remember when my friend Alan, who's looking at his phone over there, my buddy. I remember, I'm talking, buddy, we're buds. I'm kidding, I'm joking. I remember when you were in my office 6 years ago, we had the trial lawyers in there, and you got really heated. It was pretty cool to watch. I still watch it, you know, like a movie. But it was a good debate, Alan. And part of what we were discussing there was AOB. And I remember 6 years ago, the trial lawyers conceding in my office saying, we don't care about AOB. You guys do what you want to do with AOB, and we fail to act. Because many, and I'll say it, many in my position are like, well, it's not that big of a deal now. No, we should be visionaries. We should be looking to see what the potential problems are, where the leaks may come from, and start fixing those. The next crisis is coming. I certainly hope that we fix this one this year. But the next one, the masterminds that figure out all of these scams and tweaks and find loopholes, they're working on the next one. And what we need to do as leaders is saying, yes, this does happen. Let's be visionaries. Let's solve it now. Let's stop this nonsense that's costing our constituents money. So I'm optimistic on AOB. We have a great team up here. We have willing participants. So, and I've spoken to leadership, and I see a sincere attempt to go after AOB this year. And I know Kathleen, leader of Pasadena, my good friend over there, you've been a champion with tort reform. And we need to go after that because I talked to Kyle earlier today, and I said, I believe the simple fix, let's not complicate AOB. The bills that we've seen over the last few years with these, in my opinion, silly formulas that if your payout is this equals that, no. We just need to eliminate one-way attorney fees when it gets transferred. That's it. Yeah. Simple fix. Business to business, no one-way attorney's fees. And then I guess one of the questions coming up is PIP. I mean, I'm sure it's coming up soon, but you know, I voted for that PIP bill last year that we sent out of the House, and I totally regretted it, to be honest with you. I was hoping it died in the Senate, so thank you to the Senate for killing it. And you know, I'm not going to vote for any PIP bill unless it has tort reform, and I'm going to argue against it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative. That's a pretty good segue. You know, you've now kind of laid out the rest of the conversation. The next topic, we were going to talk about AOB. Each of you have kind of individually mentioned bits and pieces. Certainly there's some frustration amongst some in this room about the progress or lack of progress that has been made. And I think that there are a lot of people who feel the same way that you feel, that it really doesn't need to be that complicated. Why has it been that complicated? I mean, is it really as simple as one or two people in the Florida Senate? I mean, the House has passed the bill the last 2 years in a complicated way. Do you really think now, with the change in leadership and so forth, that a really simple, straightforward, no, the legislature, when they wrote 428 and it said that those don't transfer to third parties, do you believe a simple fix saying we really meant what we meant can get done this year?
I really believe so, Kyle, and I'll pass the mic. I certainly think the reason, again, I'll go back, I'm pretty straightforward. I didn't get engaged the last 4 years because I think it was busy work. The bill that we seen was busy work, and it wasn't ever really attempt to solve the real problem. However, that being said, I'm really, really optimistic. I got a smile on my face, but I hope I don't come back here next year and saying I let you down again. But I really think we're going to do it.
Anybody else have any thoughts on?
Absolutely. I mean, the good news is we don't have a cabinet election for 4 years, and frankly, we had some leadership issues that just did not want to deal with that issue because they needed resources to run for a cabinet position. That didn't happen, and now I think the House leadership has opened the door for us to do something. Certainly in the Senate, we have a free hand to move forward on it. And I think with both of the presiding officers standing down on the issue, that we're going to see some real change. And we're going to craft something that is going to make sense to the House, and I hope the House crafts something that makes sense to us, and we won't have this go to conference. We'll have two bills that look alike and get this done, hopefully early in the session. That's my, and like I say, it's a bipartisan issue. When you start looking, you look at the numbers that citizens and the insurance commissioner just told us, where we've created a new marketplace, and the courts have told us it's your issue. That's great news for us. They kicked it back to us, and with that impetus, I think you're going to see that we're going to take their advice, and we're going to have a new court in 2019 that I believe that whatever we do, they will probably either ask us to add to it, but they will not find it unconstitutional. So this is going to be a good year. This is going to be a good 2-year cycle, and I think you'll see a real change in how we deal with some of the big issues.
So I have to, this morning at breakfast, Ashley Khalifi mentioned that she had a meeting with a future speaker, and the fix for the AOB bill is just to put an exclamation point. You know, and I started really, okay, maybe that's not the way to do it, but the problem is, and this gets back to what I said to you earlier, oftentimes we take a simple common sense solution and turn it into something way bigger than it should be. So we're going to need your help to keep a steady course and not keep piling on process after process, because it happens to all of us. We file a bill that we think is great and it's simple, or we think it's the right way to go, and then everybody comes into us, well, you didn't think about this, so here's my suggestion. So it gets amended to add a couple of sentences, and then the next person comes in and has another suggestion. And so what happened with the bill that passed in the House, frankly, I would not have voted for it had I had to vote on the floor for that bill, because it was just too complicated. And the way I looked at it was it created opportunities for additional litigation. So please don't let us, or don't encourage us to do that again. There's a simple fix. I mean, it's more than an exclamation point, but not much more. And on all the bills that you're supporting or that you are not supporting, it's the same thing. We tend to, I've had lobbyists say to me, I don't file bills, I just add things to bills. That's not a good practice when everybody's doing it. And so we get bills when they come out, and I got to vote on them, and I'm like, what? You don't even know what they say. And there's just too much stuff in there. So, please don't do that this year. I appreciate that.
Representative Stark, you have been willing to have this conversation about AOB. Some of your colleagues in the Democratic Party maybe haven't. Do you think that there's an opportunity this year to really have this as a bipartisan issue? I mean, it tends to sometimes be more geographical than partisan, but I mean, do you think that there's a bipartisan, opportunity here on AOB reform?
Yeah, I do, but one thing you have to understand, because we have so many new members this year, they're really not familiar with the issue. I mean, we talk all the time. In fact, all of us here have talked at one time about how serious an issue this is. Now, I'm in 3 different insurance agent associations, one of which is FAIA. And anytime I go into another insurance agent's office and I say, well, what's important to you? It's always the same thing. It's always assignment of benefits. And of course, when we talk more about some of our other insurance priorities, there's another assignment of benefits that I'll bring up, and I'll talk more about it later, and there's an assignment of benefits issue now with auto glass. We ran a bill last year. It didn't go anywhere, but this is another rising issue that's going to have to be dealt with. But the one thing that we always have to consider, we talk about what should be simple, it looks easy, but you're talking about fees paid to attorneys who represent these cases. So no matter how you get into this, lawyers' fees always come up, and sure, does my party favor the trial lawyers? As a rule, yes, but we're still the minority party. So if they didn't have enough power on both sides, they wouldn't be shutting us down the way they are. So you've got to consider that. And just one last thing, I once said a remark, I know Mark Delagal's here somewhere, and I had made a mention, there's a thing we learned one time in life insurance, Tinstoffel. Means there is no such thing as a free lunch. Well, when it comes to the trial bar, and I'm not knocking the trial bar, but there's one thing that they do very, very successfully when they're working their issues. And they talk about how they're protecting people, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they're making sure that people get their claims paid. Of course, they're not talking about how the rates are going up for everybody too, making it hard to buy the insurance to begin with. But the one thing that they don't say, which I tell them all the time, is, hey, look, you're in business like everybody else. You want to make big fees on settlements. That's your business. But your business is affecting what consumers can purchase. I mean, I don't know who else here sells homeowners. I mean, I may specialize in, health insurance type products and life insurance, but I do have a P&C license and I do write homeowners. And I see my own homeowners rates going up, 25%, not due to hurricanes, certainly in South Florida, but basically due to this issue, which is creeping up among the rest of the states. And I thank you for bringing that up about the sinkholes, but because this is our issue now with assignment of benefits, and we have to solve this, and we have to work with the trial bar and get this thing settled. I'd like to get this thing settled by the time I term out. I mean, it's about time that we do this. And I did speak to the speaker about it. I told him, I actually, we all want to have our glory and this and that. And I said, I want to lead this. And he says, Rick, you're a great guy, but committee bill. I said, okay, no problem.
You've never heard of them? No, I haven't either. I don't know who they are.
So on your note that there's a lot of new legislators, there are 40 freshmen in the House. That's crazy. That's just a lot of people. I would say that your job in this industry is to educate those members. You have a personal relationship with that member. You need to go and educate them and keep it simple, and give them examples that they can use when they're defending the bill. Give them examples of how this is hurting consumers, and give them the opportunity to put that out there. I think that's a key to the whole issue, is this is a consumer issue. It's not about the attorney's fees. It's a consumer issue, and as long as you keep playing that card, you've got a chance of getting it passed.
Well, and I think to your point, something that the industry has that maybe we didn't have 4, 5, 6 years ago is compelling data. I mean, the data speaks for itself. As Chair Broxson mentioned, you listen to the commissioner, you listen to anyone else who is looking at the claims data and what is happening in trends and so forth to companies. It's indisputable. There's nothing that you can say to the contrary. And so, it's incumbent on all of us to be able to take that message and that word, talk about the consumer being first, talk about the consumer, being at the center of the claims process and being in control, and the outcome that it's having for them every year on their renewal. Did you want to add one last thing before we move on? Hey, you're the representative.
I'm in joke mood, but one of the other things I want to do this year is grow a beard like yours.
Good luck.
I know you said two
Good
things.
luck. It's going to take you a long time.
I think you're going to transition to the next question, right? Oh, yeah. Love you, Kyle.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to PIP. Last 2 years, there's been a fair amount of conversation and discussion. Last real reform was in 2012. Seemed to have a pretty good, outcome for a total of maybe 12 months or so, and then the same fraudsters are back figuring out another way around, whatever it is the legislature did to try to address the issues. How do each of you feel about, whether or not the time has come for no fault for PIP in Florida to go away? We're one of very few states left in the country who have some form of no fault without mandatory BI. I know that there are folks in the industry who are kind of all over the board on whether or not we should go that route. One thing that is, I think, pretty well agreed to is that if you're going to do it, there needs to be third-party bad faith reform. But what are y'all's thoughts on whether or not you think it is time to move away from the system that we've had here in Florida since 1972, and whether there's appetite, amongst the entire legislature to do that?
I'll be brief because I already said my comments on that. But one of the concerns that I'm going to have is if there's a push for mandatory med pay, then that's certainly going to drive rates up. So I'd be very concerned on that. I know we got to thread that needle carefully with people getting services right away if in the event of an injury. But it's without any real tort reform, I certainly won't support it.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll to touch on this a little bit. I mean, look, it really is time that we really get rid of no fault as it is. But every time we get into this, the one part we do get into is that there is a lot of fear of not having some form of no fault if it's in the form of med pay. So the question is, moving forward, can we have med pay, and will that somehow keep the rates down? Representative Santiago thinks no. I'm not really quite sure, but there's just a fear of completely getting rid of that. Also, one of the other things we do have to consider, if we go to completely bodily injury and property damage and no fault, we also have been looking at raising the limits. When I was a high school student, I don't want to talk about how long ago that was, but 1020 was what we were talking about back then. Well, 1020 doesn't really buy you a whole lot today. In fact, 10,000 on PIP really doesn't buy you very much compared to what it did back in the 1970s. It's just that it's become a cushion for, either emergency doctors or orthopedists or chiropractors to use, to make a living off of, which is what it was not intended for to begin with. But as we do raise up minimum bodily injury limits, we have to be concerned, though, that it does raise the rates, and we already have a problem in this state with, 20-25% uninsured motorists. So you've got to, bear that in mind. That's going to continue to be an issue. But whether or not I'm going to, support a complete bill or not this year, I really hadn't considered. But it really is time to move along with, I think, the majority of the other states.
Senators, the House passed a pretty simple bill last year. The Senate bill was a little more complicated and ultimately died in committee. Do you believe that in the Senate there's an opportunity to have PIP reform or doing away with the no-fault system this year?
Well, I want to speak to rather than the issue, the process. When you have confusion among the industry, it creates confusion with the members, and that will defeat any action. It certainly has been true with AOB, and I think what we're seeing now is that people are willing to put their swords down and come up with a solution that's agreeable. And I know you gave a disclaimer before the meeting that you can't come to a conclusion, but when you're dealing with legislators, you're dealing with 5 people up here that know something about insurance. Most members hate insurance, and whoever spoke to them last is probably how they're going to vote. And if they spoke to the wrong person, pushing the wrong part of the issue, it's simply not going to make it. So my encouragement to you is to make sure that there is some consensus among your group on what the legislature should do. And I think we've gotten there with AOB. The data's in. You're going to see some movement because you can quote facts and not opinions. And that would be my encouragement to you. And then if you do that, the process will take care of itself.
Senator, have anything to add?
Well, because I was the one that kind of had to be in that committee meeting where the bill died last year, I am not.
Thank you, by the way.
I still have arrows in my back, but I think what Senator Broxton said is really the critical thing, because there are a myriad of. For every one of them in the room, there's probably a different opinion on how PIP should be reformed or not reformed, and what should be included and what should not be included. And so we need to come up with a best practices and something that is presented to the legislature from the experts who are in the industry. But you really can't. What happened to me before I went to that committee meeting, I had visits from half a dozen of you. They're all in the room here, and every one of you came up with said something different. I can't work with that because we then don't know where to go. So I just kind of did what I thought was the right thing, and who knows. And so in some ways I'm glad that bill did not make it. My whole focus was I had to put bad faith on there. That was critical to me because it's something that I know a lot about. But the med pay, I don't know a lot about that. And so my colleagues don't know a lot about that. We need to be educated, and I think we need to have a consensus on how to move forward.
Well, that's a perfect segue. You mentioned briefly in your opening remarks tort reform and your involvement with third-party bad faith. I think everybody here believes that if there's going to be some sort of PIP reform, then it needs to include third-party bad faith reform. But in the few times, I know we're just 3.5 weeks post-election, and we have an incoming governor who may have some different ideas about certain things. But in the few times that I've talked to him, he has talked about tort reform. Unsolicited, talked about tort reform and his desire and want to get something done. Do you believe that with the leadership of a new governor who makes that a priority, that in the current makeup of the legislature, that we could see movement on tort reform?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I led earlier today with my excitement that we're going to see something happen this year. I think so, Kyle, and I know we only have a minute, 40 seconds, but I wanted to thank the industry because we had some bad storms in Florida over the last couple of years, and the industry's done a much, much better job in paying claims because the phone calls and the complaints that I've heard throughout have almost diminished to zero. So I just want to compliment you all with the changes you all did are serving our citizens well. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? I want to talk briefly about health insurance. We are running short on time here. Anybody else have any comments on the possibility of tort reform moving forward? We'll move on.
I want to just echo what he said about hurricanes. Hurricane Michael will be the biggest uninsured storm in the state of Florida, in the poorest part of Florida, and we're going to have to deal with that. It's going to be a federal component, but we lost over $2 billion of timber, unprecedented, and my focus is make sure that we treat those people that cannot stand up in Tallahassee, do not have a lobbyist, do not have people that's ever spoken for them, to make sure that they can continue to live in the Panhandle, and that's going to be a big issue for the my members in the Panhandle and hopefully for the whole legislative session.
Well, having been over to the impacted area, it truly is devastating. I have seen the impact of many storms in my career, including after Hurricane Katrina in Mississippi, and I felt like I was prepared for what I was going to see, and you're not. No matter how many times you've seen it, you're not prepared. It is devastating over there, and it will be a very long time before a lot of those folks see some relief and rebuilding. On that topic, have you all heard? I mean, representing agents, we oftentimes are the front line of hearing complaints from either consumers or agents themselves on handling of certain things, and honestly, so far we've heard very little in the way of complaints regarding the industry and their response. Have you all, as lawmakers, do you believe that there has been anything that's happened post-Michael that will require you all to do something in the legislative session, whether it be insurance or not? I mean, you had the House, I know, had their hurricane task force last year and talked about a number of different things post-Irma, but have you been hearing anything? Do you think that there will be specific action taken by the legislature post-Michael?
I'll only add that we need to talk more about hardening and mitigation, certainly in some of the older homes, and how do we target the right properties that need to be done. So proven in the Panhandle what just happened.
Yeah. It is in my area, and so I'm very passionate about it. Both in Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy, the legislature and the governors in both of those states manuscripted a response, federal response, in Louisiana called Road Home, and they gave everybody that was eligible a $125,000 grant. In New Jersey, $150,000. We certainly are going to have to present a package to our federal elected officials on what we can do to stand up those people that either had no insurance or will have to make some dramatic change in their life. And this is something that we're going to talk to the governor about. And I know that Congressman Dunn is working on it in Washington. So it came at a horrible time. We had transition in government in Florida. We had a very proactive governor that was there almost every day and then got involved in some election issues, and we lost his voice. And now we have a new governor coming in. We have a new cabinet coming in. So we've got we've got to rebuild the ship, and we've got to do it in a way that's never been done in Florida.
Well, let's wrap this discussion up with health insurance, something that we haven't really talked a lot about during the last day or so, but with the opportunity to have Representative Stark here and his knowledge of those issues, being in open enrollment right now, and obviously the huge population of Florida who rely on federal programs because of age, You know, so much now of health insurance regulation is dictated by Washington, D.C. There's not a lot that the state of Florida can really do. But are there some areas that you think that we should be looking at as an industry, both agents and companies, to try to address some of the issues that exist in the uninsured population here in Florida?
Yeah, there's definitely solutions that we could do here at the state. Now, before I go into health insurance, where we're talking about major medical, now, my insurance practice is largely group insurance, individual insurance, long-term care insurance, and we do a lot of things for seniors, Medicare Advantage, the prescription program, and Medicare supplements. But one of the issues that probably not going to come up this year, but it's going to have to come up soon, which is not major medical, but is long-term care insurance. So I'm just going to touch on that briefly. You got to remember that we are an aging population, and we would rather people have some form of private insurance instead of accessing Medicaid when they need hands-on care in the home. The problem we're seeing is, and I can't blame politicians on this, this is an insurance industry issue, is that long-term care policies were never underwritten properly when they first came out. And I've spoken to underwriters on that. They really didn't understand it. They put it in the same category, especially with lapse ratios, as life insurance. So just as an example for you to think about, because then I'm going to move on to major medical, Genworth, which is one of the largest writers of long-term care insurance in the state for quite some time, has announced, on top of the 20% increase they had about a year and a half ago, and we passed legislation before I got elected, rate stabilization, allowing companies then to have major increases and not raise premiums on people who already had coverage on a certain block of business. Just doing it on, coming out with a new policy, having a new block, not raising it there. So we had a 20% increase year and a half ago. Announcements have gone out. I haven't seen it yet to me as an agent, but I know it from consumers. Over a 3-year period, a 98% increase in their premium. So if your premium was $350 and now it's $450, might be $1,000. And I'm talking about a quarter. I'm not talking about for the year. So this is going to be an issue. What is our percentage of elderly in the state? It's always been very high. What are we going to do? We're going to have to work on dealing with this. So I'm just bringing that up. And, I'd like people in the insurance industry to consider that, because something's got to be done. Yeah. Now, as far as major medical, but certain things are not going to happen in the state. I wanted Medicaid expansion. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sure that my party is going to come out and go crazy and talk about it, and we're going to tie you up, and we'll have those long debates. But in the end, it's not happening. All right. But there are other things, and I'm sure that maybe some of you heard this. I'm just not as familiar with it, but there is something called, and by the way, I got this from somebody in Washington who was on the board at the National Association of Health Underwriters. And he said, your state needs to consider the 1332 waiver program. So for those not familiar with it, I'm just going to read 2 blurbs from the internet. And one, look, I'm not on record as being a huge Trump guy, but he actually did something positive. So I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, remember, you're on the record here.
The administration did something positive. But just the first paragraph, it says the Section 1332 of the Affordable Care Act permits a state to apply for a state innovation waiver to pursue innovative strategies, providing their residents with access to high-quality, affordable health insurance while retaining the basic protections of the ACA. Well, last year, the Trump administration, another thing I'm reading from the internet, the Trump administration has strongly encouraged states to establish their own reinsurance programs. In 2017, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of the Treasury approved 3 1332 state innovation waivers for reinsurance. These waivers offset state program financing with federal pass-through funding to expand the federal savings. Now, as we always do I really know exactly what that means? No. But evidently, and by the way, they show a graph of states that are working, and Florida was a total blank. I mean, it's like, you know, I don't even know if we've talked about it, considered it. I mean, I haven't seen a bill on this, but this could be something else that we do and consider.
Well, with a change of administration and leadership, you know, it always creates opportunities for, you know, people to talk about new ideas and maybe talk about things that haven't been brought up in the past or been accepted in the past. So it's certainly something that I'm sure we will hear more about over the next couple of years. We have been out of time for
No, you're going to get
probably
fired for
going
next year.
on like
You're
6
fired.
minutes now.
I just want to say I'm coming back with my PBM bill. I passed that last year. You're talking about healthcare.
Yeah.
And this year we're picking up where we left off. And if there's any healthcare companies out there, we're picking up with pharmacy and healthcare and leave right where we left off to find ways what we can do in the state to lower prescription drug costs.
Well, I think I know the answer to this question, but do we have time for a question from the audience? All right. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate the candid conversation today.